Hello, everyone. Today's daf, Bezras Hashem, is Masechta Bava Basra daf Lamed, and we will begin from daf Chaf Tes Amid Beis. Okay, right over here, right by about 7 lines from the top, 7 lines from the bottom. Pardon me. Okay, so Yehahu da Amalei Lechavri. The Gemara's today's daf is all about stories, different stories, and you'll see. How would you try to ask yourself, how would you paskin? So the Gemara says like this: Ahu da amalei lechavre. A man said to his friend, Ma boyes b'hai beisa. What are you doing living in my house? In other words, I own this house. What are you living in this house? Amalei, amalei. So he said to him like this: Minoch zvinse. I bought it from you. Don't you? I bought the house from you. Ba'acholish shnei chazaka. And I ate the years of chazaka in it. In other words, I lived there for more than 3 years. So I don't have a proof that I bought it from you. I don't have to hold on to my shtar, my purchase agreement for more than 3 years. So therefore, I agree it was your house, but I bought it from you, and I've been here 3 years. Amalei, so the guy, we'll call him the seller, and the one that's the muchzak, we'll call him the buyer. Amalei, Ano, the seller said, B'shuchune gavoy havoy. I lived here with you. In other words, you're telling me that you made a chazaka. I lived in the upper chambers or the inner chambers of the house. In other words, I let you stay here as a roommate or something like that, but not as an owner of the house. And therefore, you don't have a chazaka, because what's a chazaka means that you live there alone by yourself. But this guy, the seller, supposed seller, is stating that I never sold you the property, I never sold you the house, and in fact, all these years that you claimed that you were living in this house, I was living here too, and therefore you don't really have a chazaka. So now everybody knows that the guy who claims he bought it was living there for 3 years. So who has to prove himself? Also, Rav Nachman. So they came before Rav Nachman. Amalei, he said, Zil brar achilasach. He said the buyer has to prove himself. The buyer has to prove himself because he says he bought it, but he can't prove that he lived there. He lived there all by himself. And therefore, the buyer has to prove that he lived there all by himself, and they made a chazaka. And therefore, if he doesn't have the document that proves he bought it, we'll let him stay there. But he still has to prove that he was there for 3 years by himself. So Amalei Rava, so Rava disagreed. He said, Hachidina, you Rav Nachman, is this the right way? This, the guy, it's this, we know that the buyer was living there for 3 years. It's the seller that really has to, he's trying to grab it and take it back for himself. But the truth is, if you try to pull something out of somebody, you have to prove it. So Rava said the seller has to prove that he lived there with the buyer, or that he never sold the property to the buyer. So let's put it into words, clear words. Rav Nachman said the seller wins. Rava said the buyer wins. Okay? So now, V'rami de Rava de Rava. So they asked the contradiction of Rava versus Rava. V'rami de Rav Nachman ad Rav Nachman. And they asked a contradiction, Rav Nachman, Rav Nachman. In other words, we're going to find another story where Rav Nachman and Rava seem to contradict their opinions. Dahu, there was this person. We go to Daf Lamed Amud Aleph. The Amalei Lechavri. He said to his friend, he made like an agreement that he's selling Kol nichsei de bei bar sisen mezabein eloch. Any possession, any item that I bought from bar sisen, that collection of properties, I'm selling to you. The bar sisen properties, I'm selling to you. Hava ahu Arab, but there was one property, the have mikri de bei bar sisen. It was called bar sisen property, and therefore should be included into the contract, right? It was a Bar Sisan property. The guy is reselling a Bar Sisan portfolio that he bought, and there was one property called Bar Sisan, and that should be ostensibly a part of that portfolio that he's reselling to somebody else. Amalei, but the seller said, Holav b'bei bar Sisanim. That property that's in question, that is not part of the portfolio of Bar Sisin. So why is it called Bar Sisin? The Ikrui Hudi Mikarye de Bay Bar Sisin. Some people call it Bar Sisin property, but it's not really the Bar Sisin property. It has the name. It's just by name only, but it's not part of the portfolio of what I purchased from Bar Sisin. So therefore, it's not part of my resale to you. So they came to us, Rav Nachman. They came to Rav Nachman. The seller says, I sold you every property, Bar Sisin property, except this one. And the buyer said, no, this should be included into the purchase agreement that I have, that I'm buying all the properties that you have from Bar Sisin. So here, Rav Nachman said, the purchaser wins. And it's the buyer who has to prove that that part of the sale was not this property. The purchaser wins without proving anything. Amalei Rava said to Rav Nachman, Dina Hachi, the one that wants to pull out from his friend has to prove it. So the seller has to, the buyer has to prove that this was part of the Bar Sisin portfolio. As long as the buyer did not prove that, the seller still maintains that property because he's trying to bring it out from the seller. So, and in order to do so, he would have to prove it. So now we're left with a contradiction. Here, Rav Nachman said the purchaser wins, and Rava says the seller wins. And in the previous case, it was reversed. There, Rav Nachman said the seller wins, and Rava said the purchaser wins. So Kashya de Rava, and Kashya de Rav Nachman ad Rav Nachman. We have a contradiction of Rav and Rav Nachman versus Rav Nachman. Answers the Gemara, the Rava loy Kashya. It's not a difficulty, Rava versus Rava. Hasam, over there by this case over here, the Bar Sisin portfolio was in the seller's domain, right? And he's selling all the Bar Sisin portfolio that he has. So Moicher Koib Nifse. The Moicher he is sitting on those properties. So if he's saying that in the purchase agreement, this particular property is not included in your purchase agreement, we let the seller win over here. So therefore, in the second case, Rava said the seller wins. Hacha, but in the first case, the guy was living on the property, and the seller said, I was living with you. Well, here, the purchaser was sitting on that property for 3 years, right? So we presume that he has a chazak on that property. Now the seller comes along and says, hey, I was living here with you. It's up to the seller to prove it. The purchaser would win. So therefore, they're distinctly different cases. The Rav Nachman ad Rav Nachman loy kasha. Rav Nachman versus Rav Nachman is also not difficult. Why? In the second case of the Bar Sisin portfolio, really, Rav Nachman said the purchaser wins. Why? Because it's very odd. Why is this property not included in the sale? Kevin de Omalei de Bar Sisin, since you say that in the document, the purchase document, that the guy is buying all the Bar Sisin portfolio. And this piece of property, umikarie de Bay Bar Sisin, it's called Bar Sisin property. And so the seller is saying, oh, it's only just by name, it's called Bar Sisin property, but it's not part of the sale agreement to you because it wasn't from the original Bar Sisin property. So it's just like a Chinese fake name. So then, alei didei Rami, we say the seller has to prove himself, lagluye, to prove the lav de Bay Bar Sisin, that this property was never part of the original Bar Sisin portfolio. Since everybody's calling it Bar Sisin portfolio, and you made a document selling all the Bar Sisin portfolio, you can't now come and say, oh, this property wasn't included in the sale. It was only, this is not a Bar Sisin property, it's only called Bar Sisin. That he would have to prove himself on that. Over here, with the case with the two people, with the purchaser living on a property, and then the seller says, oh, I was living on that property with you, so you don't really have a chazakah. Over here, lo yehelach the nakat shtarab. The question is, the buyer, the halacha over here, lo yehelach the nakat shtarab. You still, as a purchaser, should still be holding a shtar. You stayed here for 3 years, and now you don't have the proof that you bought it. But if you did have a document, right, you would always have to validate a star, because every star is guilty until proven innocent. So if you have a star, a purchase agreement, you have to go to Bezdin to have it ratified. So we always say ratify your star and keep the possessions, right? But now you don't have a star. So what do you want to do as a purchaser? How do you claim it's yours? You're saying that I bought it. Okay, you don't have a proof of purchase, so you want to say you lived there for 3 years, but you have to prove that your chazaka was valid, and your chazaka was there because you lived there alone. And as long as you don't prove that, then we don't believe you. And therefore, in that case, so Rav Nachman will hold, by the first case that we learned, that the seller wins, and it's up to the buyer, the one that's been living on the property, has to prove that he has a valid chazaka, that he was living there alone. Let's go to another story. New story. A man says to his friend, "My boy is bahai besa." Let's say a guy has a home in Lawrence, whatever, and the guy comes to his friend and he says, "What are you doing living in my house?" Amalei, so the guy who's living in the house says, "Minoch zavante, I bought it from you, and I don't have a proof that I bought it from you. I've been living here for 3 years, 3 years straight, and that's it. So I don't have to hold on to my purchase agreement. So it's my house." Amalei, so the seller said, "The reason why I didn't know that you were living in my house, bishuki broi habe, I was in doing business overseas, and therefore I was in a very."
That's what I said yesterday.
That's what he said yesterday. But it has to be not like you're working in Israel and you're here as a dentist and you come once a month, once a year,
Right.
right? That wouldn't work, because since you could always come back and forth, and if somebody started moving into your house, you would eventually hear about it. If you ended up doing business in North Korea, where you had no communications to the 5 towns, then you could have a taina. You could say the reason why I didn't complain that you were here for 3 years is because I was in some faraway place and I didn't know what was going on over here. That's what he's saying. Amalei, he's saying the owner of the house, the original owner of the house, says Bishuki Baroi Have. I was in a faraway place doing business, therefore I couldn't come here and make a macha. In other words, macha means you complaint that, hey, you're staying in my house, filed something with the courts. Amalei, so the guy that was the squatter, we'll call him, or the purchaser, we don't know, he says, Vo'isli sada, I have witnesses, the chol shata have a tlosin. Each year you came here for 30 days. In other words, you were overseas, true, but once a year you came for 30 days to be here. So why didn't you say anything when you were living here? When you came here for 30 days, when you visited from the faraway country, 30 days, you should have seen what's going on with your house. Amalei, so the guy says, the reason why I didn't know what was going on with my house, because those 30 days that I come visit here, I am super busy. All those 30 days, I'm busy in my own marketplace doing business here. And I didn't have time to check on my house. Like a guy who's in Israel, who lives in Israel, made Aliyah, comes here for 30 days. He wants to maximize every minute. So that's what he's claiming, that the reason why I didn't check on my house is because when I came here during those 30 period intervals, I had no time to check on my house. Amar Rava said that is a good taina. It's possible for a person that even when he visits once for 30 days per year, he's so busy he didn't have time to check on this house, and therefore I guess we kick the guy who's lived there out of the house because he doesn't have any purchase agreement and proof that he bought the house from the original owner. Next case. A man said to his friend, Ma boyes bahai ara. What are you doing in this particular property that I have? So the guy said an interesting thing. He said, Amalei miplanya zavinse. I bought it from somebody else. In other words, the Amali, that person said Zvana Minach, that he bought it from you. In other words, you're right. I don't have a purchase agreement from you, but I have a purchase agreement that I bought it from somebody else. Now, he didn't This has nothing to do with chazaka. This is a case where he has a document says he bought it, but he bought it from the wrong guy. He bought it from somebody who claims he bought it from somebody else. So did somebody sell him the Brooklyn Bridge? Did he buy something that from a seller that never bought it from the original owner? So this original owner says to this guy, Amalei, he said, At lav komoidis, don't you agree right now? You just with your mouth said, we go to Amud Beis, the high arididhi, that land that you're sitting on was originally mine. That you agreed. You just said that it was originally mine, agreed, but you bought it from somebody that bought it from me. That's what you're saying. But you didn't buy it directly from me. You bought it from somebody else who claimed that he bought it from me. Well, Zil, get out of this property because I never sold it to that guy. Lav bal devarim didiyat. You have nothing to do with me. In other words, this is not, you're not claiming something that contradicts my claim. In other words, I'm claiming this was originally my property. You're claiming that I agree it was your property and I bought it from somebody else. Well, since you can't prove that somebody else lived there in my property or owned it or had you don't have a copy of his original purchase agreement from me. So therefore, you have to get out of the property and that's it. It's not your property. Rava said, Dina Kamalei. That is correct. That is the correct halacha. That since the guy is not contradicting the claim of the person, so therefore we make sure we tell the person that's in the property, he has to leave the property. I guess things would change if he actually lived there for 3 years, or the guy that he claimed he bought it from, and that person lived there for 3 years. So then that guy can't say, "Oh, I once owned this property, and now get out of this property," because if we know there was a lapse that the second guy who sold it to the third guy lived there for 3 years, could be has a chazaka on that, and therefore the third guy would be believed that he bought it from the second guy who bought it from the first guy. Anyway, new case. Hahu de amalei lechavre. A person said to his friend, "My boyas b'hai ara. What are you doing in my property? This is my piece of land." Amalei, he said like this. Here, it's a little different. He added something. Miplanya zavina. I bought it not from you, but from somebody else. V'achaltia shnei chazaka. And I was here for 3 years. So now he's adding 2 things. He purchased it. I don't have and I have a document showing that I purchased it from somebody else. Okay, and I've been here for 3 years. So Amalei, so the guy said, who's claiming that it was his land, the one that you bought it from, planya gazlanahu. You bought it from somebody that stole it from me. And therefore, you're claiming that you've been here for 3 years, so what? That doesn't mean anything, because your chazaka is not a good chazaka. Your chazaka is worthless, because you bought it from the wrong person. So Amalei, so the person that was staying on the piece of land, he says a very interesting thing. He said, "Va'isle sade, I have witnesses that before I purchased this piece of land, the ase imlachi bach, I came to ask you advice. Should I purchase this piece of land? V'amartali, and you told me zil zavain, buy it. Now, if you claim that now you're coming to say that this is your piece of land, I asked you before I bought it from that guy, from the other person that was selling it to me, should I buy this piece of land? And you said buy it. So it must be that you agreed at that time that this was not your piece of land." Aha. So Amalei, so the guy who's claiming that it is piece of land, he's going to say, "Yes, I advised you to buy it for a good reason." He said, "Even though I gave you the wrong advice, now I want to take this piece of land from you because I'm claiming it's mine. The reason why I told you to buy it is because there was no way for me. The guy that was on the piece of land that stole it from me. He was a very difficult person to deal with. He knew every trick in the legal system, so it'd be very difficult for me to take him to court. But you're just an easygoing guy, and therefore that's why I wanted you to buy it from the Goslin, and therefore now I'm going to be able to take you to court easily and take the field back from you. Hasheni noyachli. The use as the second person is easier for me to deal with, to take back my property. Harishan kosher, but the first guy was difficult. And therefore I did a little avera of advising you to purchase this piece of land so that you'll buy it. And now I can say to you, this is my piece of land, and you don't know all the legal tricks, and therefore I'll be able to take it back from you. Rava said, Dina Kamale. That is the correct din. That is the correct halacha. Keman, whose opinion does this align with? Adman, like Adman, this Adman person. The Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah in the end of Ksubis, Ruvain, Shimon, a Levi. Shimon is selling a field to Levi. Okay, Shimon is selling a field to Levi. Reuven signed on the document that Shimon sold the field to Levi. And now Reuven says, hey, that's to Levi. Hey, by the way, that's my field. So Levi asked him, why did you sign on the document allowing Shimon to sell the field to me? So Reuven will say to Levi, because really, Shimon stole the field from me. And I couldn't deal with Shimon because he was a difficult person. But you're an easier person. And therefore, I'd rather you have the field, but that doesn't weaken my claim that this field is mine. So Adnan said, he's right. Someone claims a field belongs to him, but he signed on a document that showed that the person that has the field now bought it from somebody else. Adnan said, Hasheni noechli, harishin kosher menu. He could still say the reason why I signed on the document because I wanted you to have the property so that I could easily deal with you and take back my field. And therefore, I was so agreeable that the Gazlan, Shimon, should sell it to you, Levi. So now, even though Reuven signed on the field, signed on the document, Reuven now could want to take back the field from Levi. So this is exactly similar to our case over here. So therefore, that's why the Gemara wanted to say, perhaps our Rava went like Adman. But the problem is the halacha is not like Adman. So why did Rava say that the dina is like this? The din is like this case. Rav Chaman says you lost your claim. Chachamim say that the fact that Reuven signed on a document that Shimon sold the field to Levi takes away any right that Reuven could claim that the field is his. So therefore, how did Rava paskin like Adman? Answers the Gemara, Afilatema Rabbanim. You can even say that this was going according to Rabbanim. Rava agrees with the Rabbanim. Hasam Avad Maisa. The reason why that you lose in the second case, the Chachamim say you lose your right is because you signed on a document that's saying that Shimon has a right to sell this property to Levi. So Reuven now loses his right to collect the field back. But in this case, the bure of it inish to mikre v'ama. People say things, and people could say things, and say it. So, in other words, it happens that people could say things, and we'll understand why they're saying it. In other words, he didn't do an action to prove that the field is not his. He just said he advised somebody, buy the field. Yeah, go buy the field. But that doesn't mean he loses the right. So if Reuven would advise Levi, not sign on the document, but advise Levi to buy the field from Shimon, so it was just a verbal thing he said, that does not mean that Reuven will lose his right to claim that the field is his once Levi buys the field. It's just a verbal advice, but we can say that Reuven did it for a good reason because he wants to repossess the property once it's in Levi's possession because he has an easier time dealing with Levi than Reuven. New story. This is the final story for today. Ahu the Amma Leilachavri. A man says to his friend, Ma boyis b'hai ara. What are you doing on my piece of land? I mean, what are you doing here? Amalei, he said, Miplanya Zabin. I bought it from somebody else. Yes, this was your land. But v'chaltiya shnei chazaka. But I've been here 3 years. I don't have a. So maybe he pulled out a purchase agreement that he bought it from somebody else, and he's been here 3 years. Amalei, so the guy says, Planya is Gazlanahu. The one you bought it from stole the property from me. So your chazaka is worthless. I mean, you bought it from the wrong guy. The guy sold you the Brooklyn Bridge. Amalei, so the guy said, Isle Sahade the Asis Ba'arte, Va'amalei Zabanini Hili. But I have witnesses that you came to me and told me in the nighttime, the day before I purchased it, that I should buy this property on your behalf. So you came to me and said that I should buy this property on your behalf. So wouldn't that indicate that you agreed that this property doesn't belong to you because you're asking me to buy it on your behalf. I bought it on my behalf. I didn't buy it for you. So therefore, what gives you the right now to come now to say that this land belongs to you? If you're ready to buy it, if you're ready to tell me to buy it on your behalf, Amalei. So the guy could say, Amina is bin denied. It's easier for me to buy it. In other words, the guy could say, who's the one that's saying that this is his land, will say, the reason why I told you to buy it on my behalf is because I'd rather you buy it and I pay a little money than I should go to court and spend much, much more money to try to repossess the land. So this was a sneaky way to get the land back to me, although it would have costed me money. So that's why I told you that. And therefore, the fact that you bought the land for yourself did not make me lose my right to claim against you that this land belongs to me. Okay, that's like, sometimes you have that in real estate. You want a tenant is paying such low rent, you want to buy him out so he should move away. So this is the guy, because this guy claims that the reason why he asked that you buy it on my behalf is because I want to be able to recollect this land without having to go to court, because I'm not a confrontational person. Rava said, a person will do that. A person would rather purchase something than to go to court. And therefore, what he's saying is making sense. And because of that, he did not lose his right to claim against the person that bought the land. He can still claim that this land that he bought off for Gazlan, and the land belongs to him. One last story. Man said to his friend, what are you doing in my property? I bought it from so-and-so, and I have been here 3 years. And here's my document showing that I bought it from so-and-so. You claim that you bought it that you've been here for 3 years. Well, I have a purchase agreement that I bought it from the same guy that you bought it from, but I bought it 4 years ago. So my purchase agreement precedes your purchase agreement. So therefore, the land belongs to me. Amalei. So the person said, the person claims that Misavrit, do you think Shnei Chazaka Tlashne Kamina? Shnei Chazaka Tuva Kamina. You say, do you mean to say, I didn't mean to tell you that I was here just 3 years. I just said the years of Chazaka, but I have many years of Chazaka here. And actually, I've been living here 6 years, at least 6 years. So therefore, my purchase agreement preceded your purchase agreement. Okay, so the presumptive is that I've been living here more than 3 years. I've been living here 6 years. So you claim you bought it from 4 years ago. Well, you bought it off the wrong guy. Rava said, Abidi Inish. Now, the question is, he first said that I've been here for Shnei Chazaka. Most Shnei Chazaka is just for 3 years. And now he's saying I've been here many Shnei Chazaka. Even though he originally said Shnei Chazaka, but a person could call many years Shnei Chazaka. Shnei Chazaka doesn't mean just 3 years. It could be 9 years, 10 years, 12 years. It's just a phrase. Now that he understands that this guy claims that he bought it 4 years ago, so this person who's on the property can say, "Oh, but I've been here for many, many years." So he can. He's not considered as if he's changing his claim. Hani mini, and we're going to finish off here. The Achal Sheva. He claims that he's been here 7 years. The Kadem Chazaka the Haishtar Daha. He's been here a years of Chazaka before this guy claims he bought it 4 years ago. He claims he bought it 4 years ago. This guy has to claim that he's been on this property 7 years ago. So he has a chazaka before the guy purchased it. We go to Amid Aleph, Avashis, but if he's just there 6 years, and this guy has a purchase agreement 4 years into it, so that means after 2 years, he purchased it. This is a big claim against him, because the guy that sold it is probably saying, I never really sold it to the guy that's living there. He's just a squatter, and I'm now selling it to the real guy for who I'm selling it after 2 years. This guy's been on the property. So the guy who's been on the property has no chazaka, so we'll give it to the guy who has the purchase agreement that he bought it 4 years ago. Okay, bunch of stories. Interesting.
Sure, thank you.